I was the ghost in every win they celebrated. You know that weird, hollow feeling when you hear your own name praised in a press release, but it's sandwiched between buzzwords like cross-functional excellence and technical support from the data team? That was me, Amanda Garner, lead architect behind Dovian Metrics' entire predictive analytics platform, the thing that helped land us 2 major PE deals and get our logo slapped next to names like Broadspire and Haven Capital on investor decks. And yet somehow, when Dale, our smarmy, beady-eyed CEO with veneers so white they should have come with a warning label, toasted to team effort, my glass was never even clinked. Don't get me wrong, I wasn't bitter. Not at first. For years, I played the role, head down, workhorse. I'd take Dale's vague vision scribbles, usually delivered over lukewarm conference room coffee and breath that smelled like stress and sugar-free gum, and translate them into actual architecture that made sense to investors. The board thought our Vision Sync forecast engine was AI-powered magic. In reality, it was me, 3 whiteboards, and 6 months of sleep-deprived logic building on weekends while Dale networked in Aspen. But I didn't care. I loved the work. Watching numbers unfold into patterns, watching those patterns predict behaviors, it was like a living language only I spoke. And speaking it well had bought the company enough credibility to secure not just funding, but buzz. That intoxicating kind of buzz that gets executives thinking IPO and tech journalists sniffing around for exclusives. That buzz I built. So, imagine my surprise when I opened my calendar and saw nothing. No invite to the company-wide 5-year strategy offsite at the Prescott estate. No prep decks. No mentions. I thought it was a mistake, maybe my calendar didn't sync, so I knocked gently on Dale's door. He looked up from his standing desk treadmill like I'd interrupted open-heart surgery. "Oh, Amanda. Yeah, no, don't worry about the offsite, it's just a small meeting, mostly vision stuff." He actually said that, just a small meeting. Like the future of the company wasn't partially balanced on the exact algorithms I wrote to get us here. I nodded, tight smile, and backed out of the room before I said something nuclear. I'd been patient. For years, I let the sales team take credit for my projections. I let product leads slap their names on tech white papers I ghost wrote. Hell, I even rewrote Dale's speaking notes the night before he was due to pitch at that European investor forum last fall. He butchered them anyway, then forgot to thank me. But now, standing in the break room staring into a burnt pot of decaf like it held the secrets of the universe, it finally hit me. I wasn't in the room because they didn't want me in the room. I wasn't a liability, I was a buffer. Someone they could parade out when they needed credibility, but hide away when the real money started talking. And you know what? That stung. Not like a slap, more like a slow burn. Like realizing the applause had always been for the puppet, not the hands pulling the strings. By the way, before we go further, if you're one of the 90% of folks listening without hitting that little subscribe button, maybe give it a tap, or like if you're feeling generous. It's free and honestly, it helps this team more than Dale helped me, which is saying a lot. Anyway, back to the silence. That day I went home early, told the team I was finishing a model iteration, which was half true. The other half of the truth, I sat in my apartment, opened a bottle of Pinot I'd been saving since my last promotion that never happened, and stared at the ceiling. It wasn't just about the meeting. It was about always being one step behind the closed door, being the name they conveniently forgot to print on the org chart, the ghost in the machine they relied on but never acknowledged. I didn't know what I was going to do yet, but something had shifted. And when an invitation landed in my inbox the next morning, one with the subject line Keynote Opportunity, Global Innovation Summit Tahiti, I didn't even hesitate. I clicked accept. The Prescott estate wasn't just some rented cabin in the woods. It was the kind of place where board members helicoptered in wearing fleece vests that probably cost more than my car. A private compound carved into a hillside, with rustic charm so curated it made restoration hardware catalogs look like yard sales. Word had gotten out, mostly from the interns who booked the travel itineraries, that Dovian's leadership team would be vision mapping the company's future from this offsite for the next 4 days. Translation: sipping overpriced bourbon while pretending Dale's buzzword soup meant something strategic. I didn't hear it from Dale. I heard it from Jenna in finance, who accidentally CC'd me on an email about carpooling from the airport. I stared at my screen for a full minute, rereading the words board retreat agenda like I'd uncovered a dirty secret. Which I guess I had. I wasn't on the agenda. I wasn't even in the room. Now, normally, I'm not the type to storm into an office demanding explanations. But something about this felt surgical. Like they'd cut me out on purpose, made the decision in whispers, rehearsed it behind doors I helped install. I gave Dale the benefit of the doubt. Maybe it was an oversight. Maybe they were keeping it lean this year, focusing just on core executives, so I knocked again. He didn't even pause his typing. "Oh, Amanda. Yeah, no, don't worry about the offsite. It's just a small meeting, mostly vision stuff." That phrase again, just a small meeting. I don't know why that one dug under my ribs like it did. Maybe because I'd heard it before. Maybe because every time I asked for a seat at the table, Dale handed me a fold-out chair and a coloring book. You're not presenting any of the Q4 projections? I asked, careful to sound casual, like I wasn't calculating how many hours I'd spent building the models they were about to showcase without me. He shrugged. We'll summarize them. Don't worry, your work speaks for itself. That was supposed to be a compliment. Felt like an obituary. I stood there in my pressed blazer and smart shoes, the uniform of someone who's played the game right, and realized finally, brutally, that I was never going to be invited inside. I wasn't a threat. I wasn't even a person to them. I was a function. A lever they pulled when numbers needed to dance. You sure you don't want me to prep a visual for the investor outlook section? I tried one more time, more out of habit than hope. Dale looked at me like I'd offered to sing karaoke at a funeral. No need. We'll keep it high level, of course. Heaven forbid we drag facts into a vision meeting. I walked out before the heat behind my eyes turned into something visible. Sat at my desk, opened the latest NetSyn intake report, and tried to pretend it didn't feel like being told once again that I was a spare part in a machine I designed. That night, I microwaved leftover pad thai and opened the invite to the Tahiti summit again. Reread the attendee list. Joram Lee, CEO of NetSyn Global. I froze. NetSyn was the rumored crown jewel in Dovian's Q1 expansion pathway. We weren't supposed to know that, of course. It hadn't been formally disclosed. But let's just say when you build the analytics engine that feeds the acquisition models, you learn a few things. NetSyn wasn't just any AI company. They were lean, private, and increasingly attractive to global equity firms. They also weren't cheap, which meant any acquisition needed exclusivity and airtight planning. Planning I was supposed to help lead, but now? If Joram saw me at a rival summit, shaking hands and talking architecture, what exactly would that look like? The thought sent a jolt through me. Not adrenaline, not fear, permission. Permission to stop waiting for the invitation and start writing my own. So I booked the flight. Window seat, direct. No checked bags, I wouldn't be missed, but I would be seen. The invitation had been sitting in my inbox for a week, like a stray $100 bill wedged under the couch cushion. Subject line, invitation to speak Global Innovation Summit, Tahiti 2025. Honestly, I'd almost deleted it. I get those things sometimes. Conferences looking for someone to fill a slot on a Thursday panel, usually wedged between a blockchain guy and a biotech startup that's trying to 3D print livers out of algae. Most of the time, I ignore them. This one, though, something made me scroll past the boilerplate and dig deeper. Keynote speakers, attendee list, sponsors, and then I saw it, Joram Lee, CEO, NetSyn Global. I stared at the name like it had grown teeth. The same NetSyn that was quietly tagged in our internal planning dashboards as Project Horizon. The same NetSyn whose growth trajectory I'd been modeling for the last 5 months. Whose tech stack I knew better than I knew the back of my own hand. Dale hadn't said a word, not to me, not to anyone outside the board, but it was obvious. Dovian was circling them. They were our next move. And now, Joram was going to be in Tahiti, at the same conference I'd just been asked to attend. Not just attend, speak at, on the main stage. I clicked the invite again. My session, Thursday morning, 11 a.m. Topic, transparent systems and predictive modeling. Hilarious, right? The one thing my own company couldn't manage, transparency, and now I was being flown across the world to talk about it. I sat back in my chair and let the silence of my apartment stretch out. It was midnight, rain ticking against the windows. My inbox was full of words from people who used my models but never remembered who built them. And this was an open door. I didn't tell anyone at work, not HR, not my team, not even the receptionist who usually flagged travel notices for the internal calendar. I booked the flight on points, used personal time, blocked my calendar with out-of-office family obligation. That part wasn't a lie. I was finally showing up for me. Packing was weirdly emotional. I tossed my old work laptop in a sleeve just in case I needed a demo, then stopped myself. This wasn't a Dovian trip. This wasn't Dale's show. This was mine. I left the laptop on the kitchen counter and packed sunscreen instead. The flight to Papeete was long enough to uncoil all the tension that had been wired into my spine for the last 3 years. Somewhere over the Pacific. Between 2 bad movies and 1 glass of mediocre Chardonnay, I started to feel something. Not peace exactly, more like permission. I wasn't defecting. I wasn't sabotaging. I was just breathing again, for the first time in months. The resort was surreal. Palm trees, infinity pools, every shade of blue you can imagine and some you can't. The kind of place that made you question why you ever chose fluorescent lighting and quarterly ockers. And the people, electric. Founders, CTO, ethics professors. A woman from Nairobi who designed a machine learning model that predicted crop failure 6 weeks ahead of time. A man from Oslo who'd built AI systems for neonatal care. And then, on day 2, I saw him. Joram Lee. He looked exactly how you'd expect a CEO to look when he wasn't trying to impress shareholders. Cargo shorts, sandals, and a laugh that echoed like it had nothing to prove. He was talking to someone from the Singapore delegation when his eyes caught mine. I nodded. He nodded back, polite, distant, good, let him wonder. The next day I gave my talk. I stood barefoot on a stage overlooking the ocean and walked through 3 case studies, 2 sanitized Dovian projects, 1 external consulting gig I'd done last spring. I talked about visibility, accountability, building systems that include the architects, not just the decorators. The applause was warm, real. I could tell because no one was checking their phones. And afterward, Joram approached me. "Garner, right?" he said, smiling. "From Dovian, that's me. I've read some of your work, didn't realize you'd be here." "Neither did my boss," I said, smiling back. We shook hands, and that moment, that single click of flesh and intent, was when everything changed. Later, as the sun set, I posted a photo. Just one me, Joram, a tiki drink in my hand, his name badge barely visible in the frame. Caption, "Always learning, always building. Visibility matters, no hashtags, no agenda." But I knew exactly what I'd done, and so would everyone else by morning. There's a certain type of silence that comes after you step off a stage, the kind where your heart's still beating against your ribs, but the world hasn't decided yet whether to applaud or forget. That's where I was. Barefoot on a teakwood platform in front of 100 strangers, holding the last word of my talk in the air like an uncashed check. Transparency isn't a feature, I'd said, it's a promise. When you keep with your people or break behind closed doors, pause. And then the applause started, not the scattered, obligatory kind. This was full-bodied, honest. I let it hit me like a wave. No Dale whispering in my earpiece, no sales exec standing beside me to reframe my logic in digestible sound bites. Just me and my words, and a clear blue horizon at my back. I stepped down, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like a borrowed tool. They surrounded me after. A woman from Tokyo who ran compliance for a fintech startup said my presentation was like therapy. A PhD from Stanford asked if I'd ever thought about publishing. But it wasn't until the crowd thinned that I saw him again. Joram Lee, standing at the edge of the veranda, drink in hand, half smiling like he'd been waiting for the rest of the world to shut up. He approached slow, casual, curious. The kind of approach you only make when you're not afraid of the answer. "You're Amanda Garner," he said. Not a question, more like confirmation. "I am," I replied. "And you're Joram?" He nodded. "I read your architecture breakdown from last spring, the one buried inside the Dovian patent filing." I blinked. "That wasn't meant for public," he shrugged. "It was public enough if you knew where to look." For a second, I didn't know whether to laugh or call legal. But then I saw it, real recognition, not flattery, not networking, respect. "You've done some interesting work," he added, sipping his drink. "Smart, efficient, not like most of what I see from firms your size." I tilted my head. "You mean bloated and over-engineered?" "Exactly," he grinned. "They all scream innovation. But you're the first one I've seen who built something that actually predicts more than it justifies. That's rare." We talked for 15 minutes, then 30. And somewhere between the fourth anecdote about bad data hygiene and his quiet confession that he preferred engineers over executives, I realized something. Joram didn't see me as a proxy for Dale's empire. He saw me. We didn't discuss the acquisition. Not directly. When I mentioned some of the challenges of keeping teams aligned without visibility into strategic decisions, he didn't blink. "Let me guess," he said. "Your CEO says it's above your pay grade?" Something like that. And yet, he said, "You're the one who built the thing that got them here." That one stuck. Later that evening, just before dinner, I stood by the infinity pool and let the light hit just right. Joram joined me for a drink, and someone nearby offered to take a photo. I didn't say no, we both smiled. Casual, like it was nothing. The ocean behind us looked like something from a screensaver, turquoise fading into gold, palm trees waving like backup dancers. I posted it that night. No dramatic captions, just a short line, "Always learning, always building. Visibility matters," but in the photo, just barely just enough, was Joram's name badge. Netsin Global, crisp, visible, unmistakable. I didn't tag him. I didn't mention the company. But anyone paying attention, anyone from Dovian, would feel the earth shift the second they saw it. This wasn't petty. This wasn't revenge. This was clarity. Because for the first time in 5 years, I wasn't watching the board play chess from behind the curtain. I'd walked onto the board, and now they'd have to deal with it. Dovian's internal Slack caught fire around 3:17 a.m. Pacific time. That's when Jenna from Investor Relations, still in her hotel room outside the Prescott estate, probably nursing a glass of rosé and her fifth slide edit, spotted the photo. She saw it before Dale did, before legal, before the board members who were still asleep in their private rooms lined with fresh-pressed robes and pre-programmed espresso machines. The post wasn't dramatic. It wasn't tagged #GameChanger or #NewBeginnings or any of the PR fluff Dale usually slobbered all over LinkedIn. It was simple, too simple. Just me standing barefoot next to Joram Lee, grinning like I'd just invented fire. Ocean behind us. My caption quiet but loaded, "Always learning, always building, visibility matters." But what really did it, what actually melted the circuits, was the badge, half obscured but visible enough. Joram Lee, CEO, Netsin Global. It wasn't a stretch. Anyone at Dovian who had even skimmed our upcoming strategy deck, who had even heard Dale whisper about next-gen synergy or quiet acquisition plays, would recognize the name. The board was supposed to introduce the Netsin exclusivity agreement at the tail end of the retreat, slide 38 of the 5-year vision deck. Dale had even drafted a smug little quote to go with it, something about strategic foresight in the age of intelligent expansion. I'd seen it. I'd written half the damn data behind it. And now, well. Now the investors were asking questions. Big ones. By 7:42 a.m., Dale's phone had 17 missed calls and 3 voicemails that all began with some flavor of, "Why is Amanda Garner posing with Netsin's CEO on a beach?" By 8 o'clock a.m., legal had joined the war room call. That's when things got interesting. Because while they could spin the optics, while Dale could fire off a panicked "oh, she's just on vacation" email, he did. There was something he hadn't considered. A clause, one line, buried deep in the Net-Sindovian due diligence packet. Clause 12.4c, all strategic integration and planning involving Netsin Global shall include the presence and advisory input of Miss Amanda Garner. Failure to comply renders the exclusivity provision null and void. I didn't write that clause, but I'd insisted on it, months ago, quietly. When they first asked me to vet Netsin's back-end systems for merger potential, I flagged some key risks, and in exchange for smoothing them over, I asked to be added to the formal oversight committee. They agreed. Probably didn't even read the fine print. Just another checkbox to move the deal forward. And now, that clause was a grenade, and I just pulled the pin. Because while Dale was sipping lavender lattes in a leather armchair, giving his vision talk to a room full of people too polite to ask questions, I was 5,800 miles away, drinking coconut water and watching the waves flirt with the sand. I hadn't checked my email in 12 hours. My phone was on airplane mode, and even if it hadn't been, I wouldn't have answered. They couldn't find me, but I knew exactly where I was. I knew what I'd done. And I knew that somewhere in that cozy little retreat, Dale was realizing that the one person he thought he could cut out of the deal was the hinge holding the entire thing together. The exclusivity? Gone. The pitch? Compromised. The board? Panicking. And me? Sun-kissed, smiling, still barefoot, still free. The boardroom at the Prescott estate wasn't built for crisis, it was built for preening. Leather chairs, floor-to-ceiling windows, a live-edge walnut table so pristine you could probably see your career evaporate in the reflection. And on that particular morning, that's exactly what was happening. The vision session had barely started when Jenna walked in pale as printer paper, holding her phone like it was radioactive. She didn't speak, just held it up and pressed play. A screenshot of the post, my face, Joram's badge, my caption, visibility matters. Then the legal Zoom window blinked to life, late, disheveled, clearly roused too early and not happy about it. Dale tried to laugh it off at first. Amanda, always off on some adventure. She's probably networking. No big deal, but no one laughed because the email had already come in. Sent at 6:23 a.m. Eastern, marked high priority. From Elise Harlow, General Counsel Netsin Global. Subject, breach of engagement clause. Body, to whom it may concern, we were approached under the assumption that Miss Amanda Garner would be a direct participant in all integration planning, stipulated in Clause 12.4c of the Preliminary Due Diligence Agreement. Her absence from all strategic sessions constitutes a breach. Effective immediately, Netsin withdraws from exclusivity negotiations. We are reopening discussions with other potential partners. There it was, the polite legal version of a bullet to the skull. The room imploded, board members talking over each other. One shouting into their phone, another muttering, "How did we miss this?" While flipping through the appendix of the due diligence folder like it could somehow unwrite the clause. CFO started calculating loss exposure under his breath. One of the newer board members, who had just started sipping his mimosa, set it down like it had turned to acid. Dale, he looked like a man who just realized the pool was empty after jumping off the roof. "This is a misunderstanding," he barked. "Amanda's not even part of leadership. This clause wasn't meant to." Legal cut him off. "Dale, the clause is binding. You signed it. She has signer status. We confirmed it 3 minutes ago." He turned beet red, then ghost white. "Call her," someone said. "We've tried," Jenna replied. "Phone's off. Email bounce-back says she's OOO until Monday." "Get her on a plane," the CFO growled. Jenna just shook her head. "She's not answering. And even if she did, it's too late. Netsin's already circulated the withdrawal to their board. It's over." The room went silent. Back in Tahiti, I was halfway through a second drink. Something fruity with a flower I couldn't pronounce and a paper umbrella that kept flipping in the breeze. I was reclining on a shaded lounge chair, legs crossed, sunglasses on, watching the ocean smear the edge of the sky like it couldn't be bothered to draw a line between sea and heaven. My phone buzzed once, then again and again. I didn't check it. I didn't have to. They were unraveling. I could feel it in the wind. The exclusivity window had slammed shut. The deal that had taken 6 months of covert planning, endless slide decks, strategic phone calls, and late-night vision scribbles wiped out with a single clause. When they signed, when I held. I raised my glass, leaned back, and let the sun warm the last corners of my bones. Dale was panicking. But me, I was exactly where I needed to be, calm, centered, and finally seen. I landed back in the States with sand still in my shoes and a tan line on my wrist where my smartwatch used to sit. I didn't bother checking my inbox until I was halfway through a latte at the airport lounge. It took 10 seconds to load, 12 seconds to regret it, 76 unread emails, 6 flagged urgent, 3 with the subject line, "Please call me," 1 from Dale, "Let's connect ASAP." I didn't open that one. Instead, I skimmed through the damage. Jenna had sent a summary of what she politely titled the Prescott incident. The board meeting had ended in disaster. The NetSyn deal was dead. One investor reportedly walked out mid-presentation and never came back. HR had already begun drafting a transparency protocol for strategic planning, which was a fancy way of saying we screwed up and need a scapegoat. A separate email chain showed legal trying to untangle the clause, asking, begging, spinning wild interpretations that maybe present didn't mean physically present. Too late. NetSyn had lawyered up fast. Elise Harlow wasn't bluffing and Joram wasn't entertaining redemption arcs. Then came the email that made me pause. Subject line, exploratory conversation NetSyn advisory opportunity. From Joram himself. Short, direct. Amanda, if you're open to continuing the conversation, I'd like to formalize something. Been watching the aftermath at Dovian. You were the value proposition all along. Let's talk. Joram attached a draft advisory contract. Consultative, strategic, hybrid remote, corner office if desired, equity on the table, no Dale in sight. I smiled, not because I was flattered, not because I wanted revenge, because the contract didn't ask for loyalty, it asked for vision. An hour later, I got a second message, this time from Valorant Capital, a firm that had been circling Dovian for months, waiting for the moment it started to bleed. Apparently, I was now a uniquely positioned asset for insight-driven innovation leadership, which is rich, coming from people who hadn't returned my calls last year when I pitched them a partnership pilot. But it didn't matter. The game had changed. I had changed. No more drafting white papers no one credited. No more being paraded like a useful prop during funding rounds. I was no longer a ghost in someone else's machine. Now I was the architect of my own. Somewhere between Gate 41B and baggage claim, my phone buzzed again. Dale, he was trying to schedule a Zoom. The subject line of the calendar invite, quick sync NetSyn situation. The kind of email written by a man who still thinks he can spin a story after the walls are already on fire. I didn't open it. Instead, I opened Joram's contract, made a few notes, highlighted the equity clause, flagged the NDA terms, suggested a few revisions, not because I was uncertain, but because I'd earned the right to negotiate. 10 minutes later, I hit send. No emojis, no warm sign-off, just attached are my terms. Let me know if NetSyn is serious about visibility. Then I powered off my phone, took one long breath, and walked out of the terminal. Not as Dovian's data whisperer, not as Dale's afterthought, but as Amanda Garner, strategic advisor, name on the damn door. The emergency board meeting was held over Zoom, but I could practically smell the desperation through the screen. The invite came through my old company email. Some intern must have forgotten to revoke access. The subject line was clinical, corporate, special session, strategic realignment vote, all members required. The agenda, just one item, motion to offer executive advisory role to Amanda Garner conditional on reinstatement of NetSyn exclusivity. I nearly laughed. They didn't even bother sugarcoating it. No apology, no let's talk. Just a motion to stuff me back into the room they'd locked from the inside, now that the fire was licking at their heels. The attached letter from Dale was a masterclass in empty sincerity. Amanda, we acknowledge recent miscommunications and oversights regarding your involvement in our strategic planning initiatives. Given the evolving nature of our relationship with NetSyn and your instrumental role in our technical achievements, the board would like to extend a formal offer to re-engage you in an executive advisory capacity. Your reappointment would signify continuity and strengthen our negotiating position. We trust you'll consider this a natural next step in our shared journey. Shared journey. That's what they called it, like I hadn't been walking behind them this entire time, patching their footprints so they wouldn't trip over their own incompetence. They included a revised contract. Same title, more money, even a stock option vesting schedule likely to dangle in front of me like a chew toy. What they didn't include, an apology or dignity, or the decency to acknowledge the clause they violated, the planning they excluded me from, or the 5 years I spent keeping their metrics from collapsing into mathematical spaghetti. At that point, I didn't even have to think about it. I opened a blank reply, typed 2 words, I decline, no explanation, no performance, just the truth. Then I opened a separate tab, pulled up NetSyn's draft agreement. Signed, 10 minutes later. Press release hit the wire. For immediate release, NetSyn Global appoints Amanda Garner to Strategic Advisory Board, Tahiti Innovation Summit Speaker, joins leadership team amid expansion planning. NetSyn Global today announced the appointment of Amanda Garner, architect of predictive systems formerly deployed at Dovian Metrics, to its Strategic Advisory Board. Garner will advise on systems visibility, ethical forecasting, scalable infrastructure as NetSyn accelerates global integration efforts. Amanda's clarity of vision and commitment to transparency make her the ideal partner as we grow, said Joram Lee, CEO of NetSyn Global. No further comment will be made at this time. That was it. No victory lap. No vindictive quotes, no Dale bashing, just facts, my name, my title, my new reality. The message to Dovian wasn't hidden. It was spotlighted, plain, direct. Beyond question, I hadn't just walked away, I'd leveled up, and now I wasn't just advising on visibility, I was the visibility and they couldn't look away. I waited exactly 24 hours after the NetSyn press release went live. No rush, no thirst trap tactics, just timing. Let it settle. Let the board digest the headline. Let Dale reread that quote from Joram 3, maybe 4 times, trying to convince himself it was all just semantics. Let the investors fire off their polite "what the hell is going on" inquiries, and the PR team quietly shift from damage control to obituary writing. Then I posted the photo. Same spot, same sun, same ocean curling in the background like it was applauding. But this time, no Joram, just me, standing alone on that deck, wearing the same easy smile. No filters, no corporate lanyard. Just a woman who didn't need a badge to be seen anymore. And the caption: visibility isn't just about what you see, it's about what they finally can't ignore. That was it. No hashtags, no tags, no what Dale mentions. Within minutes, it exploded. Ex-Dovian employees sent DMs with clapping emojis and fire gifs. 2 venture firms I'd never worked with slid into my inbox asking if I had advisory bandwidth. A data ethics professor from NYU shared the post with the note, "This is what leadership actually looks like." But the best part: silence from Dovian, total blackout. Except, of course, for the leak. Because nothing in corporate America stays quiet, not when blood is in the water and someone as high profile as Dale Simmerman is on the slab. The deal with NetSyn officially collapsed by Friday. Without exclusivity, the competition moved fast. NetSyn took meetings with 3 other suitors. One of them, Calvex Partners, came in hot with a valuation $20 million above what Dovian had offered. Investors at Dovian revolted. Rumors started circulating, some true, some conveniently adjusted for boardroom drama, that Dale had misrepresented internal buy-in, that he'd suppressed key contributor roles in due diligence documents, that he ignored internal risk flags and marginalized key personnel. Me, that last one was me. By the end of the quarter, he was gone. Official statement: Mr. Simmerman is pursuing new opportunities. Unofficially, he was handed a box, a firm handshake, and a courtesy LinkedIn post written by someone in HR who used a template labeled standard farewell. They didn't name me in the internal memo. Of course they didn't. But when the exec assistant who used to forward Dale's meeting requests liked my photo with a heart emoji, I knew they all understood. This wasn't revenge. That would have been too easy. This was realignment. For years, I let them write the story and tuck me into the margins like an asterisk. The technical resource, the project lead, the supporting voice. Not anymore. Now, I was the headline. And for the first time in my career, I didn't have to raise my voice to be heard. I just had to stand still long enough for the truth to catch up and let it speak for itself. Thanks for watching, you cubicle warriors. Hit that subscribe button. Unless you're my old boss, then you're on your own. Revenge of the coffee pot strikes again.